Elena Vasquez spent 4 years as a remote sensing analyst for one of the world's largest geospatial intelligence firms. Her team was hired to monitor NEOM's construction progress from orbit. Last August, she submitted her final progress report. The conclusion was 3 sentences long. Measurable construction activity covers 2.4 kilometers. The remaining 167.6 kilometers show no development. Satellite evidence contradicts all public progress claims. Her contract was not renewed, but the satellites don't lie, and the images tell a story Saudi Arabia cannot erase. But here is what they desperately don't want you to see. The satellite imagery doesn't just show how little has been built. It shows that construction has effectively stopped across most of the site. In this video, I will expose the satellite evidence that proves NEOM has built less than 1.5% of what was promised. I will reveal the before and after imagery that shows construction sites being reclaimed by the desert. And I will show you what 170 kilometers of broken promises looks like from space. Less than 1 week ago, updated commercial satellite imagery confirmed what construction industry insiders have reported for months. Active work on the line has contracted to a fraction of even the reduced 2.4-kilometer target. This isn't speculation from critics. This is photographic evidence captured from 400 kilometers above the Earth. You can verify it yourself on Google Earth. The images show concrete foundations, excavated trenches, and scattered equipment across approximately 2.4 kilometers. Beyond that boundary, the desert is untouched. The numbers tell the full story. According to Bloomberg, Saudi Arabia committed to building 170 kilometers of continuous, mirrored megastructure, 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide. What exists today is a construction trench, approximately 2.4 kilometers long. No mirrored facade, no 500-meter towers, foundations, earthworks, and support structures only. That is 1.4% of the promised length. Saudi Arabia has spent 8 years and an estimated $50 billion to deliver 1.4%. To visualize the gap, imagine promising to build a highway from London to Edinburgh. Then after 8 years and $50 billion, you've paved the distance from Buckingham Palace to Marble Arch. 1.4% of what you promised. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman unveiled NEOM in 2017 as the most ambitious construction project in human history. The promotional material was stunning. A mirrored city stretching across the desert, 9 million residents, 0 carbon emissions, artificial intelligence managing every system. The world's media called it visionary. Billions in foreign interest followed. Engineering firms from 30 countries competed for contracts. The promise of 170 kilometers made the investment case appear credible. But satellite imagery tells the real story, and it starts in 2019, when the first site preparation began. Independent satellite analysis firms track construction. Megaprojects globally using commercial imagery from Planet Labs, Maxar Technologies, and Airbus defense satellites. Resolution allows identification of individual vehicles and equipment. Between 2019 and 2021, satellite imagery showed expanding site preparation across approximately 15 kilometers. Access roads were graded, equipment staging areas established, worker camps constructed. The activity looked promising. From orbit, it appeared NEOM was mobilizing for a massive construction campaign. But the mobilization stalled. By 2022, satellite analysis showed construction activity concentrating into an increasingly narrow zone. Equipment was being consolidated rather than deployed along the full route. One senior satellite imagery analyst who monitored NEOM for a European defense contractor described the pattern. The foundation work reveals additional problems. Satellite imagery of the 2.4-kilometer active zone shows foundation depth and width consistent with structures far shorter than 500 meters. Structural engineers who analyzed the satellite imagery noted that the excavation depth suggests a building of perhaps 50 to 100 meters. not the promised 500. One construction engineer who reviewed the satellite data for an Asian investment fund explained what the foundations reveal. Beyond the 2.4-kilometer zone, the satellite evidence is even more damning. The planned route, stretching 170 kilometers, shows virtually no construction activity. Access roads built between 2019 and 2021 are being reclaimed by sand. Equipment staging areas that once housed hundreds of vehicles now sit empty. Worker camps along the extended route have been partially dismantled. The desert is taking back what NEOM briefly claimed, and the satellites are recording every stage of the retreat. The timeline of retreat is captured in detail. 2019. Site preparation begins. Access roads graded across approximately 15 kilometers. Equipment staging areas established at multiple points along the planned route. 2021. Peak visible activity. Satellite imagery shows equipment and personnel across the widest operational footprint. Construction media described it as the largest simultaneous mobilization in Gulf construction history. 2022. The contraction begins. Equipment consolidates toward a central zone. Satellite analysts note the first signs of demobilization along the extended route. 2023. Bloomberg confirms the line scaled back to 2.4 kilometers by 2030. Satellite imagery independently corroborates the scale back. Active work visible only in the central trench zone. 2024. Mass layoffs. 20% of NEOM staff cut. Satellite imagery shows reduced vehicle counts at the active zone. Equipment removal from abandoned sections accelerates. 2025. Current satellite imagery shows the narrowest construction footprint since site preparation began. The Financial Times quotes an insider saying the project won't work. Several factors explain why 170 kilometers became 2.4. First, the geology. The Red Sea coastal bedrock cannot support a 500-meter structure. Foundation studies confirmed this as early as 2018. Second, the engineering is physically impossible at scale. Wind tunnel effects between the parallel walls create uninhabitable conditions above 300 meters. No structural solution exists. Third, the budget spiraled beyond control. $50 billion spent for 1.4% completion means the full project would cost over $3.5 trillion at current rates, more than Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. Fourth, foreign investors rejected the project after conducting due diligence. Without external capital, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund bears the entire burden. Finally, the talent exodus accelerated the collapse. Senior engineers and directors departed in waves starting in 2022, taking institutional knowledge with them. The satellite evidence has broken through the information barrier that Saudi Arabia tried to maintain. Every professional platform is now discussing what the imagery shows. LinkedIn is flooded with posts from geospatial analysts, construction professionals, and engineers sharing their own satellite assessments of the line. The consensus is unanimous. Progress has stalled. Reddit communities dedicated to satellite imagery analysis have produced detailed comparison threads tracking NEOM's retreat year by year. Thousands of comments dissect each quarterly change. YouTube channels specializing in satellite analysis have published video comparisons showing the gap between NEOM promotional renders and actual orbital photography. These videos collectively have millions of views. Saudi Arabia has attempted to restrict satellite coverage of the NEOM zone. Several commercial satellite operators have reported receiving requests to limit high-resolution imagery availability over the construction site. But commercial satellite coverage cannot be controlled by a single government. Multiple operators from multiple countries provide overlapping imagery. The evidence is permanent and growing. The harder Saudi Arabia presses to control the narrative, the more the satellite evidence undermines it. You cannot hide 167.6 kilometers of empty desert from orbit. The consequences of delivering 1.4% of a promised megastructure ripple across Saudi Arabia's entire economic strategy. The Public Investment Fund committed roughly 40% of its domestic portfolio to NEOM and related Vision 2030 projects. At 1.4% delivery, the return on investment is catastrophically negative. Saudi Arabia's $21 billion budget deficit in 2024 is compounded by NEOM's failure to generate revenue. Every quarter of continued spending without progress widens the gap. International credibility is the deepest casualty. Every foreign government, every sovereign fund, every institutional investor can access the same satellite imagery. The gap between Saudi claims and orbital evidence is visible to anyone with an internet connection. Competing Gulf states benefit directly. Abu Dhabi and Dubai are absorbing the investment and talent that NEOM's satellite-confirmed failure has redirected away from Saudi Arabia. What does Saudi leadership know about the construction timeline that the satellites haven't yet revealed? Internal progress reports almost certainly document even more severe delays than orbital imagery can detect. Acknowledging the satellite evidence requires an uncomfortable truth. 170 kilometers was never a construction target. It was a marketing headline designed to attract investment and international prestige. Without 170 kilometers, there is no city for 9 million. Without 9 million residents, there is no revenue model. Without revenue, there is no return on $50 billion. The dominoes fall in sequence. To be fair, the 2.4-kilometer section that does exist represents real construction achievement. Foundations have been poured, earthworks completed, support infrastructure installed. But 2.4 kilometers is a neighborhood, not a city. It could function as a technology campus or corporate headquarters. NEOM's pivot toward data center and AI investment suggests this is already the internal plan. Converting the existing infrastructure to a specialized economic zone could preserve some value, but it requires publicly admitting that 167.6 kilometers of promises were fiction. The window for honest restructuring narrows with every satellite pass. Each new image that shows empty desert where a city should be standing erodes what remains of NEOM's credibility. What happens when the most ambitious promise in construction history meets orbital photography? What happens when the desert speaks louder than any press release? Saudi Arabia promised 170 kilometers of mirrored perfection stretching across the desert. They attracted billions in commitments. They spent $50 billion. They told the world the future was being built. Then, the satellites looked down and saw 2.4 kilometers of foundations surrounded by 167.6 kilometers of untouched desert. The evidence is permanent. The images don't lie. And now the whole world can see. You can check the satellite imagery yourself. Your assessment matters more than any government press statement. Is this a phased development or a permanent failure? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe if you want the evidence they can't delete, because the satellites capture new imagery every week, and every week the desert wins.